Hey there, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of the Family Law Insider podcast. I'm your host, Wendy Hernandez, and today we're going to talk about being a kick-ass dad or mom. But we have here with us today the original kick-ass dad, at least that's what I call him. Michael Mataluni is the founder and creator of the Kick-Ass Dad podcast. This is a passion project of his, and he and his wife started it because they just wanted to help other parents. They have been foster parents to several children in the past. Now they have 3 kids of their own, and they just kind of wanted to provide a way for parents to link arms, join together, and help each other out. So thank you for joining us, Mike. I'm happy to have you here.
That was a very, very kind introduction, Wendy. Thank you so much.
Oh, you are so welcome. And actually, I was a guest just a couple of weeks ago on Mike's podcast, and he is a pro interviewer, so I'm excited to have him in the hot seat like he had me in the hot seat.
I appreciate that. It's always different being on the other side. It's much, much different.
Well, I know that you're going to do great. And Michael and I met actually earlier this month at NMX. And, you know, we kind of bonded. I just felt like we had similar beliefs and similar passions. And I thought he would be a really good person to feature on this podcast because he's so grounded. He has a fantastic blog. And I want to talk to him because he is a kick-ass dad about how other parents can be kick-ass parents. So, Mike, one thing that I struggle with as a parent and that I think that a lot of other people struggle with is balancing being present with your children against all the other things that you have to do in life. For example, when I'm at work, a lot of times I feel sad or guilty because I'm not with my daughter. Then other times when I'm with her, I feel guilty or overwhelmed because I'm not doing work. So as a kick-ass dad, how do you deal with that?
Well, I think it comes down to mindfulness and being present. I think we're naturally taught that the grass is always greener on the other side and not to be in the present moment, but whatever it is that you're lacking is what you focus on. And I think that that's kind of, with the state of our technology and the media and, this go, go, go mentality, we're really taught not to be present. We're taught to always be focused on the next thing. And I think that if we can do a better job of staying in that moment, if you're at work, you're at work. There's nothing you can do to get home. If you're at home, you're at home. There's nothing you can do to go to work. So how can we begin to retrain our minds to stay focused on the present moment, be mindful of where we're at so that we can get the most out of each moment as opposed to trying to be somewhere that we're not?
That's really great. And do you have any tricks that you use in your own life to bring you back to the moment when that isn't happening, or is it always happening for you?
No, it's not always happening for me. One of the things that we teach parents is you're not going to be perfect, so don't try. But that being said, mediocrity is not the status quo. You don't have to, just because you're not perfect doesn't mean you don't give it your very, very best effort. And so, for me, I practice meditation every day. It's the first thing I do in the morning. Even if it's just 10 minutes, I've got a little podcast I listen to. It's called the Deep Energy Podcast by Jim Butler. And I'll take 10 minutes and just ground myself and spend some time in my affirmations, my I am statements. One of my favorites is I am happy, healthy, wealthy, and wise. And just ground myself in kind of those affirmations and do the meditation. And then when I find myself, throughout my day getting knocked off my horse, taking a couple minutes just to go, sit quietly, take some deep breaths, and just get back to the present moment. And, those are the biggest things that help me. And then, again, the affirmations that, and I don't just do them in the morning. I do them throughout the day so I don't lose focus on what are the things that are most important to me throughout my day.
And that's great. I do the same thing, Mike, and it's something that I do every day. There is a rare day where I'm not able to sit and meditate, and I can tell you that it makes a huge difference in my day if I don't do it. Like I really am knocked off my horse much easier. I lose my cool. Do you find the same thing, or do you
man. Yeah. If I miss in the morning, or if I'm just in such a hurry to start my day and I just jump out of bed and I start knocking things out, I go straight to email or I go straight to Facebook, and then I find myself getting sucked into other people's dramas, and and I think that's the danger of the technology that's available to us, because there is so much power in what we have access to. But I think it's if we allow ourselves to get kind of sucked into that other people's drama, then we'll easily find ourselves getting knocked off our horse and being very reactionary throughout the day. And I think for me, being able to respond to situations and not.
Uh-oh. Are you there, Mike? Are you there, Mike? Hello, Mike. Uh-oh.
And the second choice was go, there's nothing I can do about it, so why stress and just allow it to come when it comes. And so that's what I did, but I don't think I would have been able to do that if I didn't spend my 10 minutes meditating or kind of getting grounded. So it really makes a huge impact.
Okay, Mike, and I lost you for probably 10 seconds. I don't know if the world lost you. That's happened to me before, and actually the video turns out right, okay. But I missed the first point that you made.
So did I. I don't remember it at all. No,
it's okay.
No, I think it's about taking the. And you asked me if I ever fell off the horse, and the answer is absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's when you get sucked into the dramas of email or Facebook before taking that time to get grounded, and you get very reactionary, and it's very difficult to respond positively and calmly in situations.
Definitely. Totally agree with that. So when you're at home and you are with your kids, obviously there's things that we all need to do when we're at home. We need to cook dinner, we need to do dishes, we need to clean up around the house, we need to pay bills. How are you present with your kids if your kids want your attention and you're trying to get all this stuff done? Because I think a lot of people do struggle with that. How do you kindly say to your kids, can't do it right now?
Yeah. Sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
Sometimes you screw up. Sometimes you tell them to get out. I'm working out. But I mean that's going to happen. And for me, it's about forgiveness of the self. It's about forgiveness of the situation. Saying, you know what, I blew that moment. What am I going to do about it? Am I going to beat myself up and feel guilty about it, or am I going to go have a moment with my kids, sit down on the floor, and giggle with them? And I think one of the biggest things that my wife and I do. When we're hanging out and I'm at home and I'm working, because my wife's a novelist, she's a writer, she's a blogger, and we're always working on something. I'm always working on something, she's always working on something, but how do we make that time for the kids? And we just joke constantly. Like if I'm always joking with my wife, she's always joking with me, we're always laughing. And then when you're in that state of mind, your kids come bother you, it's not then you start to joke with them and you have fun. And again, it's not about perfection. It's about how can you be as mindful as you can, as present as you can, have as much fun as you can, and not take yourself too damn seriously. I think is probably the most important thing.
Okay, that's awesome insight. So speaking of mindfulness, and I don't want to get off topic too much because we're talking about how to be a kick-ass dad. Do you think it's important to raise children who are mindful?
Yes, absolutely, and that is part of being a kick-ass dad. It's very zen, actually. So for me, it's modeling the behavior. I always talk about an analogy on my show when you get onto an airplane and the flight attendants are talking you through an emergency situation, and that oxygen mask comes down. You don't go straight for your kid. You go for yourself first, because you have to have free-flowing oxygen for you if you're ever going to be able to help the child. And to me, that analogy speaks to modeling great behaviors. I teach my kids to be mindful by being mindful. I teach them that by sitting down. They see me meditate, or they see me really focus on these ideals and not just preach or teach, but they see me actually modeling the behavior. So do I see it in them now? No. I mean, they're present. Like when they're in an argument, with their brother or sister. Oh, they're fully in the freaking moment.
Right.
But it's like that's you begin to see these things later in life, and so when my wife and I were foster parents, that was the biggest thing. It was about planting seeds, right? So you can never punch these things right into your kid. They have to grow slowly. And so what we found with parenting is it's really like, you're more of a gardener than you are anything else, because, when this kid comes into this world, they have their own, skill sets. They have their own unique abilities. They have their own unique purpose. And, for me, if I'm, if that kid is an oak tree or a tomato plant, I'm not going to change that. All I can do is figure out what kind of fertilizer they need, make sure I'm not over or under watering, and kind of let them grow as they will. And for me, that has been the biggest thing, because we've got foster kids now, or not now, but we have our foster kids who were our foster kids who we talk to now, and they're going, they go, because Kristen and I were vegetarians at the time, and one of our foster sons told Kristen about a month or about a year ago, hey, if it wasn't for you, I never would have learned to like beans. Beans. Like,
Yeah.
it's the little things that
Right.
you see down the road. And these kids, they graduated college. One was a running back at Oregon Western, and just to have a little tiny impact to give these kids some kind of belief in themselves, just by believing in them, it's a game changer.
Definitely. And I love your point about taking a look at the child and what the kid really needs, because not all kids are the same, like anybody. No two humans are alike, and they have different needs, and maybe certain ways of disciplining one kid won't work with another kid. So by your statement that maybe one kid's an oak tree or a tomato plant, I mean, that recognizes the individuality of each child. And I guess being mindful, it will help you tune into what that kid needs.
Oh, I couldn't have said it better, Wendy. That's exactly right. Because we all want to, I find myself, when I'm disciplining a child or when I'm in a stressful moment, I find, I'll say the words and then I'll go, shit, that was, excuse me.
That's okay.
Those were my
We've heard cuss
parents.
words.
Okay, good. All right, good. Those are my parents' words. That wasn't me. And that was probably not even their words. That was probably their parents' words. So how many generations have we gone passing on the same parenting styles, and completely not being mindful of what we're doing and what we're saying? And that's what humans tend to do, is tend to be very reactionary in situations and just go back to their most, their easiest or most recent experience, as opposed to really being aware of that particular situation, that particular child, and how they can do something a little bit different.
Yeah. So how then does a kick-ass dad like you understand or allow the child to express themselves without, giving the child too much slack in the rope, so to speak? And maybe you can't give the child too much slack. I don't really know.
Nobody knows. I can give you my best interpretation.
Okay.
So my wife and I are very, very different people. I'm much more, I'm the kind of parent that'll sit on the floor and play tea party with my kids, and she's more of the disciplinarian, and she's got this kind of very, very big vision, but she has a very disciplinarian style, and I have a more sensitive, intuitive, compassionate style. And because we both have those very different styles, we never go too far in one direction. Yeah. And so that's really what has saved me from going over the edge of insanity, is having that balance, because I could easily go into far too much, giving them way too much slack. And she could easily go into being too tight on the reins. But
Right.
Together, we really balance each other. And I think that's why, I believe a family can be anything, gay, straight, it doesn't matter to me. What does matter to me is if there's a village helping to raise that kid. If you're a single mom, if you're a single dad, having that support system, that community of people surrounding you to give that kid a broad range of perspectives versus just your perspective. I think that's the most dangerous thing, for folks who have, alternative families, is, how much perspective, how much context are they getting? Is it just yours, or is it lots of different people?
Yeah, I think that's really valuable too, and an awesome point about maybe two parents being able to balance each other's styles out. And I wonder if a lot of people who get together and have kids have styles like yours and your wives, which are different but complementary. Because I can tell you in my relationship that's the case.
Right.
So it's awesome for the kid. But what about a situation, and I don't know if you can speak to this, but I think, you do have a lot of wisdom, so you can. What about in a situation where two parents are no longer together, Mike, and they have these very different parenting styles like you just described, so they're always in conflict? You know, if somebody wants to try and be kick-ass about how they handle it, what would you suggest?
Yeah, that's such a great point. And on our show, we have two of my partners are single dads. One is divorced, and they've been through the ringer when it comes to this stuff. And I think that if they had to go back and look at it a little differently, or they could do it over a little bit differently, maybe being a little more mindful would have helped at the time. And it really does come back to that. I talked to my business partner, my brother Dave. And these are things that he's finding, he's working on now, and they're making a huge difference in his life. And so there were times in my past where I just I was just pulling my hair out, going, what do I do? How do I bridge this gap between my perspective and my wife's perspective? Because it's really frustrating me. And I think a lot of it has to do with my own personal baggage. Because as long as I'm kind of reacting, and going into that kind of victim mentality, because I grew up, my childhood was a bit challenged, but what I would do is I would use that kind of victim mentality to, try to manipulate the other person, and that didn't serve me. I mean, it didn't give me the empowerment to be a leader in the relationship. It didn't give me the empowerment to do the personal development so that I could then, because I really think we all kind of reflect each other's emotions, we reflect each other's feelings and ideas, and until we begin to take ownership of our own, we're going to be in conflicting relationships until we can start to take responsibility and personal accountability for what we're bringing to the table. So I think it's really, again, it comes back to that oxygen mask metaphor where you really got to heal yourself, forgive yourself, understand your idiosyncrasies so you can actually work on them as opposed to trying to fix them in the other person.
Yeah, that's a great thought, Mike. And so for the person who wants to bridge that gap with their ex and is willing to do the work that you just described, if they're in a situation where that other person is still caught up in the drama and the conflict, do you think with one person doing work that the relationship can shift?
I think it can shift, but I don't think that it, yes. So to answer your question, yes, it can shift, but it takes constant mindfulness and constant practice not to get sucked into that same drama. Yeah. And what I've seen with certain people in their relationships is as they begin doing this, they just don't put themselves in position to be berated by that other person. I've got another business partner who is in that exact situation where he's doing the personal development, the personal growth, and he's seeing the shift in their relationship, and now he's having to decide what circumstances to put himself in so he doesn't leave himself open to be attacked by this person. And so you can't change anybody else, you can only change you, but as you change you can gain the wisdom to put yourself in better situations, and I think that's where people can really benefit from that personal development.
That's awesome. So this comes up a lot in my cases. Two parents not together, not getting along, kids see what's happening, of course kids are being crushed by what's happening, and then the kids start asking the parents what's happening, like why don't you love daddy or why don't you love mommy? How would you suggest that the kick-ass parents start or handle those types of things?
Sure. Well, there's a huge difference between love and being able to live with someone. I love my parents, but I can't live with them. So, being able to have that honest, genuine conversation. I think the biggest thing that kids crave is honesty and truth, because they are master truth seekers. They will find the truth, and it's up to you whether or not you want to be found, when they're 15, 16, 17, to be having told the truth or not, because they will find out the truth. And the other thing is really being aware that any negative comment you make about your ex is going to reflect poorly on you. So again, it comes down to mindfulness. How can we pull ourselves out of the situation so that we are allowing ourselves to be mindful and not jump into that it's their fault mentality? Because yes, there are relationships where you get screwed. Yes, like we all get that. But how does being a victim and then teaching your kids that that other parent is the enemy, how does that help the child? And so at the end of the day, you've got to ask yourself, what have I done to help the child, as opposed to validate my own anger or validate my own victimhood.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I feel like there's a lot of people out there who need to hear that message. So I'm glad that you shared that. So, I want to go back and focus a little bit on the situation that you're in with your wife. For those people out there who are still with the other parent, they both want to be kick-ass parents, but there's always this kind of negotiation that's happening in marriage. And I don't it could be characterized as a tug of war. I mean, each partner has their wants and their needs, their own desire or need to put on this oxygen mask. And sometimes partners feel like, hey, like I'm carrying all the weight here. Like, where are you, dude? How do you reconcile this in your own relationship, which you've told me is a fantastic one, Mike? I could use your help here.
Well, I think that's a really, really great point. And I think it comes down to, again, personal leadership and personal accountability. So let's say, for example, I'm the kind of guy who's, let's say I'm carrying all the weight and I feel like I'm doing everything and my partner's doing nothing. Okay, fair enough. Well, why do you feel that way? Why are you actually doing those things to, are the things that you're doing actually making an impact on the relationship? Are you putting the most effort into the things that are going to validate that other person to make them want to come along with you? Or are you just doing it to prove the fact that you're the one carrying all the weight? And I think that's part of it. I think people attract experiences and relationships in their life to validate their victimhood or to validate their anger. And so the question you really have to ask yourself is, why am I doing this? And if it's for good reason and you're actually just getting things done and this person is just a lazy slob, okay, that's a different story. That's a different story. But I think a lot of times people mistake what their partner really is willing to do because they're so wrapped up in their own personal dramas or their own childhood experience that they're just replaying these things as adults. And I can tell you, kids who are victims as kids, they tend to be victims as adults, and kids who are angry as kids tend to be angry as adults. So again, that oxygen mask, what are you doing to get over these old childhood wounds so that you can see clearly who your partner really is and how you can create a relationship that's going to benefit the both of you and not just validate your own personal childhood drama that's continuing to play out. And I think Freudian psychology really pushed on the parents and the parents are the ones responsible for doing all this, and yes, you got it from them or you experienced it from them, but as long as you're an adult, you can't use that excuse anymore. That is over. That ship has sailed. So what are you going to do now to begin to own that? And I think so many people, whether they want to admit it or not, are locked into these childhood dramas and they're playing out in their adult life. And until you can get over this story, this old story of who you are, you're not going to play well with others.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I've seen that at work in my own life. There's times when I blame my parents because I had horrendous relationships or horrendous partners, and okay, at some point I need to just buck up and say, this is my fault. I'm not making the right choices. I'm not loving myself, whatever it is,
Right.
I can't blame my parents forever, so that's a really good point. And,
Right.
And I want everybody here to know that I love my husband and he's fantastic and he does a lot, so I didn't mean to imply anything other than that by the previous question, but I will say that it is hard because the family has needs, our child has needs, our relationship has needs, but then we have our own needs as individuals. And when you add all the things going on in life into that mix, sometimes you get yourself lost.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing is we're not taught to live our lives from the inside out. We're taught to live our lives from the outside in. And so we're taking these experiences that we're having with the world and we're internalizing them and then we're reacting to them. And again, so that's why I feel like meditation and journaling and you don't have to do meditation, but there's so many different activities, and that's what we do. We, at Kick-Ass Dad, we have our greatness coaching program that we actually help parents with these things and we coach them through these things. But that's the biggest issue is instead of living your life from the outside in, recreating what's going on inside and living your life out that way. And I think that, we can, buckle under the pressure of the world, but if we create the inner strength and the inner forgiveness, and that's the biggest part, stop judging yourself. We always get into these shame cycles where we do something we don't like, then we judge ourselves for it, then we have low energy levels, and then we do the behavior again because we don't have the energy to choose to make a different decision. So why are we going to judge ourselves into submission, as opposed to what if we were actually able to forgive ourselves, create more energy so that we can make better choices, and we can create that spiral of energy as opposed to that shame spiral of negativity. I think that's what can really make some shifts in some people's lives.
For sure. And I think, guilt is a huge thing for a lot of people in the world. And I know that when I was on your podcast, we talked about being raised Catholic, and, along with being Catholic comes that Catholic guilt. It plays a huge role in my life.
Man, me too.
Struggle with it? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, it was most of my life, to be honest with you. It's not been till really, I went to college. I actually dropped out of psychology and philosophy and went to hike the Appalachian Trail. And I was just so tired of society. I was so tired of all the nastiness and the violence and the guilt and the shame and the fear. And I was like, I got to get out of here. And so I went and hiked the Appalachian Trail, and it was an incredibly enlightening experience. I went to go find myself, and I came back to society, and society hadn't changed. I had changed slightly, but I was still struggling deeply with this sense of guilt and this sense of, foreboding. I always thought the sky was going to fall, and I didn't know why. And, it wasn't until I really started doing the personal work, and this is recent. I mean, this is within the past couple of years that I've really done a lot of the internal work to get me outside of my comfort zone so I can start addressing these issues in myself, forgiving myself, forgiving my parents, not, living life as a victim, because that, whenever I go into stress mode, I go right back to that victim place. Why is this not working for me? What's wrong with me? What, it's like, and I would do this like clockwork. And it was like I was just so tired of it. I was so done living life that way. And so that's what really made the difference for me, because those are things that are hugely effectual on an adult, still living out those past dramas of the guilt and the fear and the shame and the doubt.
And, as you practice not being the victim, does it get easier, Mike?
It sure does. It sure does. It takes time and it takes energy, and you go there. But the key is recognize. The second you go into that victim mode, go, oh, that's what that is. I can recognize this now. I can put my finger on it, and now I can say, okay, gotcha, no thanks, and now I'll do a positive affirmation, or now I'll do an I am statement, or now I'll go do something positive for me, or I'll crack a joke or have fun or whatever it is, just to get me out of that moment, because once you get in that moment and you don't recognize it, you become lost in it, and you don't even realize what's happening. So that's where, again, mindfulness plays such a key role in personal development and being a kick-ass parent.
Okay, that's the theme for today then, is mindfulness. I think it should be the theme for every podcast, because it's come up in almost every podcast that I've had.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
It is amazing. So it's about time to wrap up, Mike, but I have a few closing questions, a little quiz for you.
All right.
About being a kick-ass dad. So
sure.
How does a kick-ass dad handle a tantrum in the middle of a restaurant?
That's a great question. Depending on the age, obviously, but one of the things that we do is we feel that the people around us don't deserve to experience that. So, if we're in a restaurant and our kid's got a tantrum, one of us takes the kids and we go outside. And depending on the age, either you have the conversation or you just let them cool out or whatever. But, there's nothing that, and my wife can attest to this. If we're in a movie, if we're anywhere, we don't put up with it. We don't. And and maybe it's just a matter of getting them out of the situation. But to leave a kid in there screaming, when other people are trying to dine or have a good time, it's completely disrespectful. And if we're actually mindful of the situation, we want to make sure as many people are having a wonderful time as can be, and not destroying anybody's night because of us or because we're not disciplining our kids. So yeah, I think getting the kid out of the situation, and if they don't want to get out of it, then they go home and deal with the consequences. I think one of the biggest mistakes we make as parents is allowing our kids, reinforcing the behavior that it's okay not to think about other people.
Yeah. Okay. I think that you get an A on that one.
All right.
Okay, next question. And this is actually not a hypothetical because it actually happened to me the other day. I have a almost 3-year-old, and she wanted some cheese the other day, but I didn't give her the right color cheese. She wanted white cheese, and I gave her yellow cheese. So she smacked it out of my hand and threw a fit, and so I picked her up and said, okay, we're going to your room for a timeout, and I was sitting with her on her bed trying to get her to calm down, and she smacked me across the face, And so...
What do you do?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really great question, and thank you for putting me on the hot seat with that one. I can feel the lights now and the dripping of sweat coming down my face. No, that's a great point. And I actually had a friend call me the other day and say, Mike, I am just at my wit's end. My kid's, he's being an asshole. He's a 2-year-old, But you can vent like that with other parents. You have to be able to.
Yeah.
And it's like, I know you don't think your kid's an asshole, but you got to vent, and it's cool.
Right.
So, he hit him in the face, and I'm like, he's like, can I hit him? I said, okay, here's the deal. If you want to get a kid's attention that's 2 years old, it's very difficult to do. Sometimes certain parents are cool with giving a pop on the butt, but here's the distinction. Don't hit out of anger. Because the second you hit out of anger, the second the guilt comes in, and the second that kid can feel that guilt, and they've now won another battle. So don't give into that anger. And a lot of times you just got to walk away. And I think 90% of the time you walk away. If there's a time in public, my wife was in, this was a few years ago. My wife was in Publix, and my son is like literally pushing his finger into the meat in the meat counter, and like, stop it, and he won't listen. He will not listen. And so she gives him a swat on the butt, and immediately he comes back to that present moment.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. But what I will urge people to be aware of is the second you lift that hand out of anger, then that's where you can begin to run into problems.
Okay. I like that. And I will tell the audience listening that what I did was I just left the room because I didn't know what else to do.
Yeah, and that was probably the right decision because you were probably pissed. So
Yeah. I was pretty pissed. I was floored. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So this is the final and the biggest question, and this is a question that my husband insisted that I ask you with the Super Bowl coming up. How does a kick-ass dad watch the Super Bowl in peace with a 3-year-old who wants his attention?
That's an excellent question. I am a restaurant manager by trade, so I'll actually be working that day. So I'll be at peace because I'll actually be at work. But I guess the suggestion that I would give is to build a giant cage and keep it. No, I'm kidding. I don't think, and you'll have to apologize to your husband for me because I don't think there is an answer to that question. I think you just got to kind of deal with it.
Okay, well, maybe mom will help out because I don't care that much about the Super Bowl. So.
Oh, well, again, that comes to that balance piece, right? So that's what my wife and I do. If there's something and here's a quick thing for you. This is something I learned from Stephen Covey years ago. He goes, okay, so if you and your spouse are trying to figure something out, do a 1 to 10 scale. Okay, so Super Bowl's coming up. For me, that's a 9. I might go 1 to 10. How about you, honey? That's a 4. Okay, would you mind taking the baby while I watch the Super Bowl? Right, cool. Okay, so and then in a different situation, you got something coming up. Honey, what is this to you? It's a 9 for me. Okay, it's a 5. Okay, well then I'll take the baby and then you go do your thing. And I think that we got to balance each other. And again, it takes a village to raise a child. So how can we support each other and create great networks of great people who can help us, not lose our lives just because we have children?
Yep. That's great. I love it. And I'm sure that James is going to love what you had to say. And I hope our audience loved everything Mike had to say. And you have to check him out. Mike, tell everybody where they can find you and your podcast.
Yeah, you can go to kickassdadblog.com or kickassdad.org. You can also shoot us an email at kickassdad1@gmail.com. And then you can find our podcast on iTunes. It's just type in Kickass Dad. That's 3 words. And you can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter at KickassDad1. But we love guest feedback. We love for folks to listen to the show and email us. And We're all about helping to answer these questions, linking arms with families. We're not always right, but we're always going to have fun trying to figure it out.
And this has been a fun interview. I'm so happy that you joined me today, Mike. Thank you.
Wendy, thank you for having me.
And that's going to do it for this episode of the Family Law Insider Podcast, everybody. Remember, we're on your side when it matters most, and I will see you next time.